there is a problem in the status quo which might disadvantage women in workplaces. But we do not want Sheryl Sandberg, coming from a privileged background where she can afford to choose work over her family because she can hire two nannies, for example, to send a powerful message to women that you can only choose one or the other. And if you choose work, that you have to conform to the very standards that we find problematic. I think this is the problem with the Lean In movement, and this house proudly regrets the Lean In movement. Clarification, Lean In movement is a movement started by Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, sending a message that that women are encouraged to reach corporate leadership by conforming to the standards in workplaces, even if they are unfair, and if they are very problematic and very patriarchal based. So in today's debate, I would like to prove to you why we regret the Lean In movement. First, because we believe that it's an effective, counterproductive, and further perpetuates the patriarchal system that team opposition and us, everyone here, finds problematic. And second, on how it's disadvantages women who might want to choose otherwise or not want to conform to these standards. We think that it disadvantages women in general, and this is why we regret the motion. So on the first point, on why this is ineffective and further perpetuates the patriarchal system. Now, what does this movement do? First, it sends a message that you have to confirm that you are okay if you conform to these patriarchal standards to reach corporate leadership. We think that this is problematic. Why? First, because it is an implicit recognition that the system in place that we find problematic, that disadvantages women, that disfavors them, for example, in workplaces, is indeed the way to go. That it somehow works for these women, that it is legitimate to conform to, right? Because we believe that once we realize, no thank you, that you need to conform to these standards, it sends a message that somehow the system works. And we think this is a dangerous message to send. Why? Because we believe that it sends a message to these women that there are no other ways. We think that women will start to think, no thank you, that this is the only way to go to reach corporate leadership, right? We think that it's not what we want today. Secondly, we think that the system currently in place, if you really think that the only way to go is by conforming to these standards, then we think that the system itself, it isn't that patriarchal, right? If Sheryl Sandberg has managed to reach corporate leaderships, as well as other people, other women in corporate leaderships, it means that the system is progressing. It means the system isn't that patriarchal. No, thank you. We think that there is no longer hard discrimination on paper, for example, and we think that the status quo is improving. We realize that the status quo is imperfect, right? But we think that we are progressing, and we continue to advocate for women. We continue to have support groups, equity committee in workplaces. Thank you. And women can even resort to career counseling that the companies provide. We think that companies as Barclays and Accenture in Singapore have provided these measures to advantage women, and we think that it's within the company's incentive eventually to change the system because it maximizes the workers' welfare, right? And we believe that the status quo is improving, and we think that women, no thank you, currently are given the same opportunity to reach to the top. And we think that even if the system isn't perfect, this system hurts women even more. Before I move on,
insofar as you are not able to prove that this is a harmful choice in and of itself, tell us why it's an illegitimate one.
It's illegitimate because you realize that these standards are problematic. And now you're telling women that these standards somehow work, that these standards are okay as long as you reach an end that you want to go to. We think this backlashes the very notion that the feminist movement has worked to, right? Has strived forward, that the standards are damaging to women, that women should have free choice, that women should choose under no pressure. And now you are letting these women conform to such standards, and we don't think it's fair. Okay, moving on to my argument. We think that the company, at the end, when you encourage this kind of movement, is less likely to change, right? Because now they have a way to justify that, yes, even these women realizes that my standards work, that my unfair criteria or the sort of soft discrimination that is happening in the workplace works for them, and they are willing to go by that standards. We think that this incentivizes the company or the current unfair standard to change. We think that when when the women themselves realize that this works, it reduces the incentive to change. Moving to my second argument on how it further disadvantages women who might want to go to choose otherwise. We think that what this movement does, it creates a perception that you cannot do both, that you have to choose one or the other. Because, you know, to be successful, you have to sacrifice your family. To be successful, you have to conform to standards that tell you if you take a leave to take care of your children for more than 3 months, we are not going to promote you. We think that it makes women lose trust in themselves. No, thank you. Because now they think, oh, I cannot be able to balance both. We think there are women out there who genuinely believe that they want to have both, right? Or they want to have a successful career as well as a lovely family. We think that this is something that most women face. But at the end, you make women believe that you have to choose one or the other. You make women believe that you cannot possibly be successful in the workplace without sacrificing your family, which is included in the very standards that the company create, which they might feel unfair. We think that not every woman can do this. Not everyone is able to willingly sacrifice their family or even can be able to afford to do that, like Sheryl Sandberg. We think that there is a possibility to think that there's a dichotomy, that you are either a CEO or you rather stay at home, right? Because, and then at the end, we think it also reduces the political will to provide for other aspects for women's lives, because now the company will think, oh, if Sheryl Sandberg can do this, if our CEO can do this, can do work maximally without sacrificing their family, then you have to choose. You either stay in this company or not take or have less return to it, for example. Or it can justify the companies to say that, oh, we're going to give you a less paid leave because you fail in being able to rise to the top without somehow being successful in the family. We think that it's important to protect women who might choose otherwise in this case. For all of these reasons, we are proud to propose.
Okay, the Prime Minister for that speech. Now I can invite the Leader of Opposition to the case for opposition.
Madam Speaker, in my speech I talk about three things. Firstly, what are the problems currently existing in the status quo and how we do better with the top-down approach existing in corporate structure, and thirdly, what this movement is all about and how it actually implements top-down approach and how is it better in this scenario. All my rebuttals are in debate, but certain key points stand out. So, on one side, the stance from one side government was that the patriarchal notion does exist in corporate structure, and it goes ahead and tries to disrupt where patriarchal notion exists and how is it still a legitimate choice. They say everything is okay and the status quo is okay and we can go ahead and try to affect the franchise. So there's a very big tension in their case when they assume that when they go ahead and assume that this debate doesn't include certain patriarchal notion. We say that this debate assumes a certain kind of patriarchal notion already existing in the corporate structure, and how we counter that better and go ahead and try to enfranchise women, go ahead and try to.
So,
do better for them. And secondly, when they go ahead and characterize the lenient movement as the only way for women to rise up in the corporate ladder, we say that is not true. What the lenient movement is all about is that a variety of choices exist, and the lenient movement say that this is one of the choices. This is a legitimate choice for you to rise up the corporate ladder. This is a legitimate and effective choice for you to rise up the corporate ladder, and lenient movement preaches a variety of choices, but says that this is also a legitimate choice for women to take to rise up the corporate ladder. And thirdly, the whole point of women who don't opt into this gets disadvantaged in the corporate structure. We say that women are already disadvantaged in the corporate structure, and they already face disenfranchisement in the corporate structure. They face promotion paralysis, hiring paralysis, and here we go ahead and say that when this is one of the legitimate choices to go ahead and try to counterbalance the policies, we say that that in a sense we do better for women in the corporate structure. So what are the problems currently in the status quo? We agree that a very bad corporate culture with respect to women does exist. There's currently minimal traction for women to rise up the corporate ladder. We agree that glass ceilings do exist for women in today's scenario, but a patriarchal, and this is the reason that a patriarchal norm does exist today. So what we do is, for example, when women are getting hired or getting promoted, women have a tendency, and more importantly, there is a notion existing in the corporate structure that women will prioritize other things over their career. For example, judgment, and therefore a judgment is passed on productiveness and utility of women in these structures, and that is why there's a paralysis on the promotion and hiring policies. Although we believe that these notions can change and will effectively change and will better change when implemented from the top down. When these women do exist in strategic positions in that corporate structure and are themselves in the strategic position to make changes. So how is this top-down approach achieved, and why is it important? So we say the top-down approach is essential in the corporate structure, and this is where we differentiate normal societal norms from the corporate structure in essentializing top-down approach. There exists a necessity for uniformity, and this is very important. There exists a necessity for uniformity across the corporate structure, and policies are made and followed in a wholesome level across the spectrum of the ladder. The important point here is to notice that non-conformity to these policies leads you to getting fired at the end of the day. So here we say that these policies and top-down approach in corporate structure is essentially important because it is followed and people conform to these approaches in and of itself. So we believe that women, when women rise up the ladder and when women are in the position of power, it is easier for them to make this decision and change and implement policies in the first place, which will be followed in the company in the corporation in and of itself. Moving on to what this movement is about. So this movement is about, if you buy into, so what we go ahead and say that this movement is currently about when the women buy into this patriarchal notion for strategic reasons, it is okay. It is a legitimate choice for them to buy into this patriarchal notion for strategic reasons. So this movement is currently about where ends justify the means, and where we can change the means at a later position of time when we are in power to make those changes in the first place, where we achieve the end goal better and policies are made and implemented, where these women are given more rights at the end of the day. And we say that we do better for women because when they go ahead and the strategic positions to make those decisions, we say that the top-down approach does work for them, and they go ahead and make these changes which trickle down the whole through the ladder and implement all through the spectrum. We believe that decision making can come from above and change notions because of a necessity of conformity, as I told you before, in the corporate structure. This necessity of conformity is really important because when these changes and policies are implemented, people across the corporate ladder do follow these policies, do follow these changes, and they go ahead and try to conform to these policies when they come from women in power, women in strategic positions, which we achieve through the lenient movement. Before I move on, I'll take on.
Yes, we realize that top-down approach is very beneficial, but why is conform to standards you find problematic?
Conforming to standards we don't find problematic. We say that it's a legitimate choice. It's not the only choice, and this is where you need to characterize the lenient movement better. It's a legitimate choice to go ahead and try to reach the strategic positions, try to reach the top-down approach by going ahead and try to reach this top-down approach by going ahead with the lenient movement, because it is a legitimate and effective choice in the end. We're not saying it's the only choice, but it's a legitimate choice, and we can go ahead and try to follow that to counterbalance the patriarchal notion that currently exists in the corporate structure. And secondly, it differentiates from the normal notion of feminist movements and otherwise. As I told you before, the corporate culture is inherently different because the necessity to conform is really important, because people can't can't actually opt out of these policies, can't actually opt out of these conditions. They have to follow certain notions, and when these women reach, and this change will be inherently effective, because when these women reach those strategic positions, they can go ahead and try and make policies which will actually be followed by all levels of the corporate structure, and that is why it's really important. And thirdly, on a very important point of where aspirations of women and how the status quo currently tones them down, and how lean movement does better for them. So if a woman believes that career is greater than family for her, and if a woman goes ahead and actually believes that the career is important and more important than family for her, these women feel that they're dissociating themselves from the feminist movement. These women feel that they're dissociating themselves from the current notions of what a woman should be like in the corporate structure, and that is where they tone down their aspirations, because they want to conform to these notions. They want to conform to these women, to what a normalized structure of women is, and that is why the pernicious patriarchal social notions are harmful when it comes down to aspirations of women. So what lean movement does is currently allows women to legitimize their choices, and B, they don't come under the pressure to conform to these feminist movements, because now the lean movement and getting ahead is a legitimate choice for the feminist movement in and of itself. So what have we told you today? We told you that we do better for women when they make the top-down approach, where they can go ahead and make changes in and of itself. Thank you.
I can give the opposition to the speech now and to the Deputy Prime Minister. Please.
The entirety of the opposition case is that the ends justify the means, because the top-down approach works. As long as we get enough females up at the top, we can do whatever we want, and that's great. We don't care how they get there. This misses all the nuances that Cheryl was talking about, like on how the method on which you get to the top matters as well, right? Because all that kind of analysis was just simply sidestepped by the leader of opposition. Before I go into rebuttals, two clarifications to make. Firstly, is the corporate structure we see today patriarchal? Yes. But the patriarchy that we see is insidious, right? There are no laws on paper on company policy saying we will discriminate against women. We believe that our board of directors should be 100% male. There are no paper laws, and in that sense, it isn't patriarchal in that way. But more importantly, it's patriarchal because it's insidious, right? The corporate structure encourages soft discrimination. You don't promote women because you're scared and they're going to get pregnant and take 3 months of leave, right? That is the reason for patriarchy in this society. What Cheryl spent her entire speech talking about was how this lean-in culture, when you subscribe to this system, you send a message that this system is pretty legit, this system is pretty okay, this system works, because despite all its failings, women somehow still manage to climb up to the top, right? By pretending to take on the mental man. Sit down, right? You say that you send a message that, you know, it isn't as patriarchal, we can work with it, it's fine, because we still see women at the top, and that's why it's so dangerous. Second clarification, is the lean movement advocating one choice out of many? No, right? Because insofar as an option is one option that is broadly and strongly encouraged, right? Read the info slide, right? Because in fact, under our work, let's make the comparison. Under our work, it is one option under many, because we still believe women can choose, right? Women can choose to pursue corporate careers over their family. That's perfectly legitimate choice coming out from Cheryl, right? But under opposition's work, it becomes the dominant choice. Why? Because when it's a broad encouragement from very powerful female individuals, both in the corporate world and the feminist movement like Sheryl Sandberg, this prevents them from choosing other choices, because under that circumstance, under that world, if I choose any other choice, I'm anti-Sheryl Sandberg and I don't want to be seen as that. Sit down, no thank you, right? They say it's a free choice, which may be so on paper, but if you're a female working on the ground, it doesn't seem like that, right? It doesn't exactly seem like a fair choice for me to go against what the powerful feminist movement leaders seem to have said. Moving on to the rebuttal, where I'll now deal with the remainder of the little bits of points that first opposition was talking about on how ends justify the means. No thank you, right? Yes, he says the top-down approach is good, but why is it specifically harmful when you get to the top by problematic means, right? Because you advocate certain norms. In getting to the top, you entrench these norms further, right? That you have to adopt traditional masculine traits in order to be where you are. You have to be dominant. You have to be firm. You can't take maternity leave, right? The CEO of Yahoo or something, right? She gave birth to kids and she was back in 2 weeks, right? Like, we think that's an unacceptable standard that we're holding people up to and say if you want to be a CEO, you gotta be like that. We don't think that that's a way in which you get to the top. We don't think you're advocating the correct kinds of norms and standards that are amenable to change even after you get to the top, right? Next, even if you get to the top and you try to implement changes, the point of a leader and the charisma of the leader and the effectiveness of a leader to implement change, people look at you the whole way, right? You don't just look at the CEO based on where he or she is right now. You see how he or she has climbed up through the corporate ladder, right? For example, if I lie and cheat and steal and stab people to get to a CEO and I try to implement changes, you will be slightly less willing to follow my lead, right? Because of the way I got to the top. Similarly, in the less extreme case, if people feel like you are not being true to yourself and you're not being true to the feminist movement in doing it, then we think that is a problem, right? We think that the way people get to the top is inherently very important to the changes that are trying to affect. Points of substantiation and analysis by Cheryl never once tackled. Go.
Under our paradigm, women are more emboldened to admit that they don't want to compromise their career for their children, which means they're more likely to be promoted because men see them as better economic, more productive candidates. So what happens to your paradigm?
Firstly, not much because we already have places where the third wave feminism means that women can make the choice to put their careers over their family. That is very clear coming out from Cheryl. Moving on. Right, so substantive number 1, right? How this creates a psychic prison for the next generation. What is the zeitgeist now, right? That women are discriminated in the workplace, but we are fighting against it. They are moving up, they are asserting rights. We have third wave feminism, right? Status quo is melting and shifting before our eyes. The old methods of discrimination on paper are gone, right? We see now a soft discrimination that exists. But we see examples of increased maternity leave, paid maternity leave given to female employers. We see more female CEOs. I see my female colleagues that are both successful in their family and career spheres, right? We think that because of this, the current notion right now is that status quo isn't perfect, but it's getting better and we can all work towards a better future together. Under their world, what's the zeitgeist for the next generation? For the kids of these colleagues of mine, right? It becomes that women should conform to the system. That like what Cheryl said, that you can't reform your standard and you should follow the sandbox, right? Because that's what the cultural zeitgeist is going to be when this becomes the dominant way of thinking. Because to do so otherwise, once again, is to be anti-sandbox. No one wants to be anti-feminist, right? If to be a CEO, I have to adopt traditional masculine traits and be headstrong, be firm, and those kind of things. This creates a false dichotomy that Cheryl is talking about. In fact, it makes it worse because it entrenches it in the mind of the next generation. When you're talking about changing norms, Madam Speaker, you also want to think about the future generations who are going to be implementing these norms. And we said that on their side, they disadvantage the future generations. Even worse, we don't think long-term change happens on their side. Second substantive, right, on how this cements the divide between males and females in pushing for rights. Because one core assumption running throughout their case is that only females can push for equal rights. Only females, when they are in the top echelons of power, can push for equal rights. Can't the males do that too? Isn't that the point of the feminist movement? Why must we force females? Why must we force women through this kind of unsavory means to get the office if the only the only thing they can do when they get the office is to implement these kind of top-down changes? What we on the side of proposition encourage is working with male allies working with male allies to enact that kind of change. We think that that's a very important thing because if that kind of message is being sent up by the Lenin movement, is that only females can do this job, you necessarily exclude 50% of the population from ever being substantial allies to your cause. We think that no matter how you look at it, this is not a wise strategic move on the side of the feminist movement. So what have we shown you today? We've shown you that we have actually sufficient analysis on the corporate structure and the Lenin movement and how this actually isn't a free choice in the sense that they want to destroy. We have shown you how ends don't justify the means because the way you come to the top is very important when you're thinking about implementing change. Cheryl substantives hasn't been attacked. We invite them to come and attack both our substantives. For all these reasons, we are very proud to propose.
I think at the end of the speech, I invite them to learn opposition.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Wait.
Everyone's ready? Yeah. Madam Speaker, Sheryl Sandberg started the Lenin movement to start a counter-narrative against the existing tropes perpetuated by the feminist movement, that screwing over the career for your family is a legitimate choice, and that's something you should do. You shouldn't bow down to patriarchal notions of the workplace because it's inherently anti-feminist. We think it's important that this counter-narrative exists because there exist several women who want to prioritize corporate success, or who want to prioritize their career aspirations over actually going to family, but feel pressured by the feminist movement and by the majority of society that sides with the feminist movement to not do so. This emboldens them to do so. This breaks the glass ceiling that they often face because they're more likely to accept the fact and more likely to parade the fact that they're not willing to go ahead and have a family, or they're completely comfortable with taking up a job when they're about to get pregnant, as compared to their paradigm where that doesn't happen. But let's get something extremely clear. Side government in this debate has run a negative case, because at the end of the day, they accept that a problem exists of patriarchal notions. At times in the PM, they weren't willing to accept that as well. But they don't do anything to solve it. So there's no comparative essentially coming from side government to exactly how these patriarchal norms or tropes in the workplace get solved. Because we told you that at the end of the day, even if you would assume all your harms exist of how you get to the top, at the end of the day, insofar as these people are more likely, insofar as women are more likely to implement top-down approaches that are effective, by the way, conceded by them, that are effective in actually combating these tropes, we win this debate, Mr. Speaker. The only harm, therefore, coming out from side government is that, oh no, the means to get there matters, and therefore these people will be seen as illegitimate. In the worst case scenario, even if you assume everything they say to be correct, we say we don't care because at the end of the day, we think having women power is an extremely important thing. I'll show you why in my speech. But I'm going to go ahead and tackle what they said as well. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, rebuttals. They tell us that, oh, you're going to be seen as an anti-Sheryl Sandberg or as an anti-feminist movement, as a member who's anti to the feminist movement. First of all, get this straight, guys. Thirdly, feminism preaches that you should have free choice insofar as it doesn't reinforce patriarchal norms. We think that this exists as a counter narrative because this says that yes, go ahead, like we don't condone patriarchal norms, we don't think they're a good thing, but the best way to combat them is by buying into them initially and then rising to the top and then being in a position to change these patriarchal norms from the top down, Madam Speaker. I think that's extremely important to nuance this debate that side government missed out on. We think they lost that debate because of that. But then secondly, Madam Speaker, they tell us that we're going to, and this clashes with Benji's main point, that the way you get there matters. Like the way you get there matters, and under our paradigm, the way women are going to get there is by being dominant and by buying the patriarchal narratives. Here's the thing. First of all, Benji, by your own characterization, these patriarchal norms are extremely subtle and extremely pernicious. It's not like someone is going to be seen as exclusive, like someone going to be seen as explicitly being very dominant or very male-like. But secondly, Madam Speaker, we think that in any case, your journey to a CEO takes place over 20 or 30 years, Madam Speaker. It's not like you backstab someone in one day and become a CEO here the next day. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, we think that obviously, given that it takes place over a long period of time, there's no such thing as there's no immediate perception that gets formed. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, and most importantly, we tell you that primarily in a corporate, you achieve or you rise to ranks on merit. That's the problem, Madam Speaker. Where we tell you that when you have two candidates of equal merit, a woman is seen as a less optimal candidate because you have that perception that she's probably going to go and have kids, or she's less, and obviously she's less likely to admit that given the current narratives that exist of feminism. But the point of here is this: when you have two equally meritocratic candidates, you feel less likely to promote the woman because you think that she's less optimal as a candidate. That's the concept of a glass ceiling. But what we do over here, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that that glass ceiling doesn't exist. Women are more likely to accept that their career aspirations matter to them the most, and they're not pressured by society, pressured by the feminist movement to not do so. This means, Madam Speaker, they're actually more likely to reach the top of the corporate ladder as compared to their paradigm, where they haven't shown us any propensity for success. Also, you only reach that level if you are of a certain caliber meritocratically. So at the end of the day, the primary metric that any corporate would ever use is meritocratic, which means that there's at best an extremely small concentration on what your like demeanor is at the workplace, and whether you bind those, whether you're vigilant or you're dominant as a male. They haven't shown us the scale of that harm. We therefore think we win that issue. But lastly, before I continue, I let you go.
Alright, so you talk about feminism being a choice, right? So even if you concede that people like career-minded women are benefited under your paradigm, what about the other group of people who aren't, who are now going to be disadvantaged at work because everyone's expected to sacrifice
again, but then that's the problem with your case, and this is reflective in like other substances that they argue. They say that we exclude the male population from doing so. Like, no, the lean movement is particularly inclusive in having social circles or lean-in groups where men are allowed to come and discuss biases that they may have seen. It's extremely inclusive towards men. But even under our paradigm, men are still allowed to like assume positions of power and implement top-down change. We just think that women have a greater propensity to do so as compared to other men. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, the fact that like everything you said on your side isn't mutually exclusive to your paradigm in and of itself. Like, so, like, yeah, sure, there are some women who won't prioritize their career and want to go and have family. How does this hurt them? They're already being hurt by your own admission, Mr. Speaker. These people are already being disadvantaged by the tropes that exist. Under our paradigm, we make it more likely this trope will not exist in the future and that these women won't face that discrimination. As compared to you, who don't do jack shit for them because you're not willing to accept the burden of actually changing these gender tropes, actually changing the situation at the workplace in these areas. Sit down. Okay. Lastly, Madam Speaker, what is the exclusive benefit of this work, of this movement? We think that it creates social space for discussions about the workplace that are independent of other feminist agendas. We think that's important because often feminist discussions are associated by society as being one that try to drag the agenda into anything. They're sometimes often seen as trivial or sometimes seen as being overly demanding. We think that this creates a social space where discussions purely about the workspace, purely about the workplace and discrimination in the workplace can take place. The fact that the website allows you to join the organization and enter into lean-in circles so you can discuss bias that you might see, how you want to combat bias or policies that you might want, means that this allows us to go ahead and create an insulated workplace, insulated space where we can talk about it. Not just that, it goes and empowers and tells them that it's okay to go ahead and put your career aspirations first. It also preaches to women, that also tells women how to go ahead and balance work and family life, how you should go ahead and do it. Because the most insulting question that women face is how do you manage to do it all, assuming that there's a dichotomy between work and career, and the women can't manage to do it somehow. Big achievement is they manage to balance work and career. The fact that it's not always a dichotomy between work and career is that how they preaches to women that how you can go ahead and balance it. But lastly, Mr. Speaker, and most importantly, when you have a top-down approach, you ensure uniformity. It's better than having a bottom approach where you have just one team in an organization preaching feminism or preaching that patriarchal norms shouldn't exist. When you have a CEO preaching it, it's uniform. If anyone doesn't follow it, regardless of whether he's a regional manager or a small time employee, we think there's pressure on him to follow it. That's why we think that's a better way. Yeah.
I think the speech now that
we win. This movement isn't simply about creating more choices, but it is in fact overwhelming and pressurizing women to choose one or the other to either say, I want to prioritize my family or I want to prioritize my work, and I can't do both, right? The kind of choice that they put on their side doesn't exist. And second, if we prove to you whatever top-down approach that they want to talk about doesn't happen, and it doesn't in fact change the system and doesn't forward the feminist movement in helping other women be able to get into these positions, to tell you that you win this debate today. So I'm going to go about proving these 2 points, and my 2 points of contention. First of all, about how exactly do we change the corporate culture, and secondly, what exactly are the individual women? So, first question, how do we change the corporate culture? They came up in the second speaker and accused us of not having an alternative. That is false. From first speaker onwards, we told you a clear alternative, which is simply whatever they are not doing, which is we are finding both top-down as well as bottom-up changes happening. How this is going to happen is that first of all, we need to establish that people need to recognize that there is a problem with status quo. No, thank you. What we told you from Cheryl is that under their paradigm, people don't recognize that there is a problem because they point to that single female up there in that top position and they say the system isn't flawed. That women could get up, so can you. That means that there is no longer any incentive for you to ever create change. So the kind of alternative that we then suggest on our side is that fine. If your system is really patriarchal, then let it be patriarchal, but we must retain the ability to call it out for what it is, right? We don't allow you to put one woman in this insignificant role up there and then allow you to bypass the entire problem. But on our side, we call it out for exactly what it is, and in this way, we allow like grassroots movement, we allow other women within the organization to point fingers, to appeal, to say that, you know, I applied for this position, but I consistently fail to get promoted because there is this discrimination that is insidious within the system. Only by this way can we change on our side. We also want top-down approach, which is what I'm here to talk to you about, right? I think that men similarly, this is going to happen under their side because it creates a dichotomy that I'm going to talk about further in my speech today. But ultimately, just to establish, we do have an alternative. We don't think that their solution is ever going to be effective, but we want on our side is completely different. So, think two responses. First, essentially, once they reach these top positions, what happens is that successful women tend to have this tendency of expecting that every other woman can match up to their standards, right? This is precisely what Sheryl Sandberg is doing. She herself managed to reach the top by compromising family, but not really because she had money, so she could hire nannies. And essentially, that is what she's telling the world. She's telling them that, well, maybe I'll try to create top-down change, but if I can't create top-down change, that is fine. Because you yourself should be able to reach the top using the exact same methods that I did as well. That reduces the incentive. Well, thank you, sir. For these women at the very top to want to create top-down change in the first place after they have gotten there. Second response. We think that the women alone, these one woman in the board of like 10 other men or 9 other men, can't make the change. You can claim that you have this like fancy title of like COO or CEO, but ultimately, these women are never the ones solely making decisions for the entire company. It's often the entire board of people, it's an entire group of people making the change together, right? And having to vote on these changes together, especially when we're talking about such big changes that they want to suggest to us is going to happen. No, thank you. So what happens is that it becomes tokenistic, right? When the women get into power, this signifies to everyone else that's fine. There is very, very little incentive for them to want to change, meaning that when they are voting on changes, for example, the women can raise their hand and say, I want this to change, even if they do so, which I proven they're not likely to. The other 9 men are just going to be like, no, we don't agree. It's not necessary. We don't want to have this change. Top-down change is not going to happen. Thirdly, we think that this also creates the male-female dichotomy, which is exactly what Penny talked about, which we don't think they really sufficiently responded to, right? This entire idea that the moment Sheryl Sandberg comes out and steps out and says that, you know, you need to be in these positions to create change, this creates the perception that males who are in these similar positions can't, or that males in these similar positions won't be able to, right? When you create the perception that a woman should always be fighting for her fellow gender's rights, that creates backlash, right? Men start becoming resentful. You'll be like, why is it that they have someone to fight for us? And similarly, these other males in these top positions will also want to say, you know, we need to fight against that. We need to make sure that women don't start like overwhelming us and overpowering us. We need to make sure that we also have systems in place that men can also be promoted rather than just having a board of all females. This causes this dichotomy that we don't want to exist. No. Last of all, we think that this woman isn't really a role model because she doesn't tell people, she doesn't tell these women that you can get to the top. Rather, it's a very different kind of narrative. She's telling the women that you can only get to the top if you're willing to sacrifice your family, if you're willing to make these sacrifices, right? That is not the kind of role model that we really want. Essentially, we're telling you that you have to forget that you are a woman in order to ever become a CEO. What kind of gender like equality is there ever when a male can consistently remind himself and remind everyone else that he is a male and still become a CEO, whereas the woman has to essentially forget, right, that she has a sexuality, that she is a female in order to ever reach the top. Before moving on,
you tell us, are we telling you that women have a greater propensity for success under our paradigm and actually reaching the top? On the comparative, tell us how you solve the problem along with the rest of your new analysis under our paradigm.
Okay, I've already talked about that like extensively in my speech, right? But essentially, what happens on your side is that maybe you have like 3 women in the short run and like these 3 big positions in these big companies. And in the long run, nothing changes because the system doesn't change, as I've already told you in my 4 days of analysis. What happens on our side is that maybe you take a bit longer, right? Maybe these women in the short term don't get into these key positions, but that creates traction that allows them to start gathering support and gathering better weight for them to be able to create these change in the long run, which is then going to be sustainable. That's the kind of change that we want to effect on our side.
More than that, by the other points about how ultimately, secondly, what is best for individual women. They told us that there is a choice. I told you no, right? There's already a culture and a pressure that tells women you have to choose one or the other. It simply isn't fair when the counter narrative, which essentially becomes the dominant narrative, becomes you have to choose one or the other, right? It's unfair. Women can't, it's gender inequality, and you're calling it out for what it is. Then they told us in the second speaker that this creates a social space and insulated workspace. In the first place, we don't see what is the need to separate this from like feminist movements or like gender equality, because it is like inherently insidious already within the workplace. We do need to talk about it. But more than that, we think on outside, we generate more discourse because we can actually identify the problem for what it is. Whereas on that side, they're simply sweeping it under the carpet and pretending that women don't exist, males don't exist, everyone is supposedly equal when that is never the case. For all these reasons, we are so proud to propose.
I thank the government for that speech. Now let me invite our business.
So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to talk about three main things in my speech. The first is whether the situation in the workplace and whether the problem does exist. Then I'm going to tell you on side opposition how we choose to go about it, how the leading movement would actually work, and thirdly, how at the end we do better for women in the workplace, which they haven't done. They haven't shown us anything that they do on their side. But before that, one key rebuttal that doesn't integrate into my speech is that complete new analysis that came into the government whip speech. That on when she goes on to say that it's like women, even though they reach at the top-down position, are more likely to fail, aren't good enough to employ the policies. Well, it's still better in our paradigm when they do reach the top, right? Women are more likely to become icons and succeed more likely to reach the top, other than your paradigm where there is no propensity for them to reach the top in the first place. And they've misrepresented our entire case and our entire movement by showing that this is the only choice. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that multiple choices do exist, but this is a legitimate one and it's okay for women to follow this choice. Moving on to the first point of my speech. The situation that in the workplace and whether the problem does exist. So we saw a contradiction in the PM speech and that throughout a bench, right, where first she tells us that women are given equal opportunities in the workplace, and then they tell us that this gives a company a way to justify the discrimination and bias. Well, if equal opportunities are given, then where is the discrimination and bias? So let's deal with the problems that exist, which we've proved to you throughout our bench. Firstly, we've told you that women are considered a less active or less productive employee. We've told you that they've in their interviews, they're asked constantly what are their marriage plans, what are their family plans, whether they're likely to leave work. They're considered less productive because of maternal leaves, etc., because they have to take care of their family. Women are considered less productive employees, because of which employees are less likely to hire them or less likely to promote them to more intense positions because of these issues that exist. Secondly, we've also shown you that women are biased against during promotions, right? We say that if there is an equal male candidate who is against an equal male candidate, it's more likely for him to be chosen than for the women to be chosen. And then they tell us, why do you essentially need only women to remove this bias? Why can't males at the top do that? Well, we tell you that, first of all, we encourage males also to come into the discussion and tell us and help us with this. But secondly, on our side, it is much more likely for a woman at the top to remove these biases that exist in the patriarchal society. Thirdly, we've told you about the societal norms that exist. We've told you that women are made to believe, because of societal norms, that is unacceptable for them to prioritize their career over family. Even though they might themselves want to do so and might want to believe so, they can't act upon it. We on our side tell you that this problem norms, and thus this is what we're going to solve. These are the three problems that we've shown you, and these are what we're looking to solve. And only we're making an attempt to actually solve these problems. On their side of the house, they do nothing to solve any of these problems. Okay, yeah, go.
So tell us one policy that is going to change societal norm and mindset, where we think the only way to do that is
Okay. So, like, I'm going to deal with that later also. How does the lenient movement actually work? So we say that the lenient movement is a corporate-backed campaign that encourages women to promote themselves individually as a more marketable and more productive candidate, while discouraging solidarity and downplaying the damaging effect of systemic gender biases. We say that it encourages more women to act on their choice. We say that it doesn't backlash against the feminist movement, whose principle is free choice, but it rather gives them the free choice to choose what they wish to do, whether they wish to choose their career or family, or even if they want to choose their family. We've said that, like, that happens in status quo anyway, but it is legitimate, it is okay and acceptable for the women to choose career over family. We say that this lenient movement will go ahead and encourage more women to aspire leadership. We're saying that this lenient movement will remove these gender biases, and we say that through this lenient movement, even if in the instance you have to buy into this, we're okay with it, because at that point this is the only way we're going to succeed, and then even though we remove it, but without this we cannot succeed in the first place.
So
Thirdly, moving on to how at the end we do better for the women in the workplace. So we tell you two things: short-term benefits, long-term benefits. Firstly, we say that the end justifies the means. We've already proven to you that because of this, when women are in the leadership and in recruitment positions, more women are likely to be hired. Secondly, more women are likely to reach the top of the ladder. We say that the gender bias that exists in promotions are likely to go when there is uniformity in the workplace. And thirdly, we say that these women are more likely to remove the problems that exist in society, such as promotion, gender bias, and salaries, equitable salaries. We say that when there's a woman in the leadership, it's more likely for there to not be an occurrence of male getting a much higher salary than a female, and that's what we do to remove. That's the problem we remove on our side. We say that it encourages more women to have greater aspirations. We say that one of the main goals of the lenient movement is to tell women that it is, and this is where I deal with the POI more, it is okay for women to choose career over family, and it is not a bad choice. It is acceptable, but moreover, even if you go ahead and do it, it supports them and helps them to balance both. We say, like, it's okay for you to choose career over family, and we're going ahead and we're also helping you balance both of them. Long-term benefits that I was talking about. A top-down approach that we say will help. So we see another contradiction on side government, right? By which the Prime Minister tells us that the top-down approach is good and it should happen. The DPM tells us it happens, but it's not, the ways don't justify the end. And thirdly, the whip comes up and tells us that the top-down approach is entirely bad and it will fail because women at the top won't work. So the clear contradiction on the side government, by which PM tells us top-down approach is good, whip tells us top-down approach is bad because it will fail anyway. Thus we tell you long-term benefits. Firstly, it ensures uniformity. And this is what our entire opposition benches told you, right? When women are in strategic positions of leadership, the whole company is preaching these policies. Women are more likely to be hired and more likely to succeed in the company. Thus, in the long run also, we say that this is beneficial. But secondly, we say that it is acceptable for them to get into these patriarchal norms. So in the short term, if you do bind with these patriarchal norms and then in the long to remove it, we say this is the only way we can succeed, because the society that exists today, this problem cannot be solved in today's problems without buying into these patriarchal norms. So what have we shown to you today on side opposition? We've proved to you a problem exists, we've shown you how we'll solve it, and we've shown you what the consequences will be and what the benefits will be. On side opposition, on side government, they've done none of that. Thank you.
Right, thanks. I would like to invite the reply speaker from the opposition bench.
Madam Speaker, if you look at side government's characterization or their understanding of what the lenient movement is, it is utterly simplistic. they assume that the lenient movement is one that just tells you that patriarchal notions are good and they're a way to succeed, and you should go ahead and operate with them. We told you it's way more nuanced than that. It tells you that you shouldn't cow down to the the overwhelming feminist narrative that patriarchal notions in the workplace are always, and that the way to deal with patriarchal notions in the workplace is to always out. It legitimizes the choice. You can opt in and you can strategically buy into these patriarchal choices because that's the way to succeed. And then once you're in a position of success and a position of influence, actually change those gender tropes. So obviously we've told you a lot about what these gender tropes in the workplace are. The fact that women are not seen as being as competent men, as productive as men, because they have to balance their family life and look after their children. Or they have to go and and take that to do so. That once for the women who actually want to make a change in the workplace, they feel more emboldened to opt into these patriarchal norms and succeed and do so. But secondly, Madam Speaker, the ones who actually don't genuinely buy into this feminist concept of prioritizing your family over career just to stick to the patriarchy, go ahead and have the ability to do so, or have a narrative where they can buy into. I think it's extremely important that this movement therefore represents that narrative and represents those people and gives them a social space to discuss what their views are on this. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, this movement is more than just telling you a particular thing, because the movement entails several other things. It's an extremely inclusive movement that not only includes men, but also has several other factions, like telling you how to balance your work and how to best balance your work and your work and career. How to have constructive conversations with your spouse about who should be the parent who stays at home, or how you should balance, how you should go ahead and change the power dynamic within relationships when both spouses are working, Madam Speaker. Way more important than just telling people that one thing is better than the other. So the dichotomy, therefore, on government side is that, when this movement arises, women get split into two different factions. There's one who prioritize career and one who go ahead and don't prioritize their career. I'm going to deal with that. The harms to this were very simple coming from side government. They told us that there are two key harms. Firstly, or three key harms rather. Firstly, that women who opt into this get disadvantaged. Firstly, the advantage to this. That assumes that this is successful, that assumes that our policy and this movement is successful because the women who opt into this will get advantaged as a result. But we tell you that it's extremely important that these women be advantaged and these women have a higher propensity for success because they do nothing to combat the glass ceiling on their side, Madam Speaker. They do nothing to ensure that these gender roles don't exist. The only thing that came out in government with is that we want bottom-up change, we want grassroots change. We are actually telling us what that is or how that works. We're not very appreciative of a new matter. But secondly, Madam Speaker, the second harm they pointed out was this, that the patriarchal norms get reinforced. So sure, maybe the patriarchal norms get reinforced in their worst case, in our worst case, and we're willing to accept that patriarchal norms might get reinforced in the short term. But once you have a person in a position of power, who's in a position of influence and can actually change these corporate cultures and change the cultures within these organizations uniformly across the entire organization, we think it's a massive benefit to have. Even in the short term, we're willing to accept these gender norms as being more prevalent if in the long term they do get removed. But lastly, Madam Speaker, they told us that there is a principal problem with actually accepting these patriarchal norms on the way to success. We told you that, look, it's not about principle in this matter, it's a strategic buy-in which goes ahead and ensures that you have a higher propensity for success. Insofar as you cannot prove to us why women in your paradigm are more likely to succeed and reach these positions of power, insofar as you cannot prove to us that you actually have people in positions of power who are willing to change these gender tropes, a problem that you acknowledge, we win this debate because we're the team that actually does that. Very proud of you.
Thank you. Like to invite the government plan.
Let's ignore all the new material that we brought up and ask two main questions, that their side is accusing us of. Is the lenient movement a free choice? Throughout the branch, we say, no, it really isn't, because it portrays anyone who doesn't follow or doesn't subscribe to this ideology as a failure, as anti-Sandberg, because we are predominantly strongly encouraging a certain lifestyle as the expected lifestyle of a true feminist would lead, or a successful female would lead. And we don't think that that's very helpful. More about this later. But this is something that we forwarded consistently through our bench. Secondly, are we sitting back and doing nothing about the glass ceiling? Patently false, right? Because Cheryl spent half her speech telling about how we are doing something. We are highlighting the problem. We are showing that patriarchy still exists. It is insidious. It's gone underground. We have to root it out. Merely having token female COOs or CEOs doesn't solve the problem. Just putting females in the top echelon only gives the males only a bigger excuse to say, look, the system is kind of fair. We have females at the top, therefore we don't have any incentive to change anymore. Analysis straight from Cheryl, never once tackled. Two issues in the debate today. Firstly, who better changes the system? And secondly, who better affects the woman? Firstly, on the system, right? We've characterized it as insidiously patriarchal. Cheryl talked to you. Cheryl and I talked to you about how it's discrimination against promoting females because of maternity leave. About how soft discrimination still exists, right? These are things that we recognize. Joanne talked to you about how you have to forget you're a woman in order to get an aid career. We don't think that this is a paradigm that we can stand for. What they do is they entrench this very paradigm because you force a dichotomy between you can either have work or family, right? There's a problem with policy making because like what Cheryl said, when you start viewing all women as sandbergs, right, as people who should back down, come back from maternity leave after half a month. When you impose a standard on women, we don't think that is amenable to changing people, changing norms, changing the structure of the corporate system for the better. Let's look at the comparative, shall we? What opposition wants to do is that they want a few powerful token women at the top, and the perception that the system works is going to be there because we have women at the top, right? Even if they got in these positions, they are not able to affect a meaningful change, right? If that's the case, then that's not very useful for their policy. This is bad because it in fact legitimizes the system which got them there, right? They're going to point to the system, look, the system works, look, the system works, look, we should just keep it, right? Whereas on our side, we continue the change that we already see in status quo, right? Where women are moving up based on their own merit, right? And then people in the top can enact change because the way they got there is seen as legitimate. This is the kind of thing which they poo-pooed and tried to say that it wasn't important, but it was, and they never really tackled it. Secondly, on how we affect the woman, they have come a lot and they accuse us of not doing anything for the woman. We need to prove something about women. Now we're going to prove it, right? And we've shown you how this existed throughout the entire case, right? We need the lenient movement, they say, to encourage people to go for the career because they're not currently doing it now. Really? No, right? Because what we talk to you about the third wave feminist movement is people are perfectly okay in making that choice, and people do that all the time. Let's break it down into the two kinds of women, right? The career-minded woman and those who are not. And for the career-minded woman, on both sides it's a wash because on both sides they can go and pursue their careers. But what about the vast majority of people, or maybe even a substantial portion of women who are not career-minded in that sense, right? On our world, right, they still have a choice. Yes, there are problems, but we recognize that the system is flawed and we have an incentive to work to fix that system. On their side, it's not okay for them, right? Because they can't afford to let themselves be seen as anti-sandberg. The system is going to continue to discriminate against them, and they're going to lose all incentive to affect that system, to change the system to affect this woman. So if you really want to talk about who better affects women, it's clearly us. They haven't talked to the point of how it drives a wedge between men when they portray that as not inclusive of actual change. Their only response was that, oh, men can join in on focus groups too. Or we can we think it's more likely that women will enact this change in the end. This doesn't tackle the main point coming out from second, that the message that the men have no part to play in this process, right? You in fact isolate them, like what Joanne said, and you don't make them part of the process. Because you better change the system, because you better benefit women, it is clear that you should side with the government.